Hello students, today's class is on morphology of bacteria. By the end of this session, students should be able to know briefly about classification of microorganisms, size, shape and arrangement of bacterial cell. They should be able to differentiate between gram-positive and gram-negative bacterial cell wall, know the bacterial cell wall appendages like capsule, flagella, fimbriae, and also about some atypical forms of bacteria. So looking to the microbes or microorganisms, those who having cellular organization are bacteria, fungi and parasites like protozoa and helminths. There are certain microbes with no cellular organization like virus and prions. So viruses have no cellular organization. They depend on human or animal cells for the metabolism and replication. And prions are the proteinaceous substances with no nucleic acid which do not have a cellular organization, and they cause neurodegenerative diseases in humans. So having known that microbes with cellular organization are bacteria, fungi, protozoa and helminths, let us move on to know that these microbes with cellular organization they're included in two groups, either prokaryotes or eukaryotes. So prokaryotes include bacteria and blue-green algae, and eukaryotes include fungi, protozoa, helminths and other algae. If you look at their characteristics, the nuclear body of prokaryotes is called nucleoid. It's not a true nucleus because of lack of nuclear membrane. And in eukaryotes, there's a true nucleus with nuclear membrane and nucleolus. Looking into the cell wall, the bacterial cell wall is made up of peptidoglycan, whereas that of eukaryotes is made up of either cellulose or chitin. The cell membrane or the cytoplasmic membrane of prokaryotes has no sterols, exception is mycoplasma, whereas in eukaryotes the cell membrane contains sterols. The membrane-bound organelles like mitochondria, Golgi apparatus and endoplasmic reticulum are only found in eukaryotes but not in prokaryotes. And if you see the ribosomes, they are 70S in prokaryotes and 80S in eukaryotes. So here you can see the picture. On to your left is a picture of prokaryotic cell. You can see the blue cell wall, then a black one is the cytoplasmic membrane or the cell membrane enclosing the cytoplasm, and cytoplasm is having a diffuse nucleus known as nucleoid, and there are certain ribosomes where protein synthesis happens. And there are certain additional appendages like the capsule present only in certain bacteria, and the flagella which is also present in certain bacteria, which is organ of locomotion. If you look at eukaryotes, it's having membrane bound organelles in its cytoplasm, and it has a true nucleus with nuclear membrane and nucleolus. So moving on, let us know about the morphology. Let us discuss the bacterial cell morphology and the headings of size, shape and arrangement. So microorganisms are too small. They're measured in micrometers. They're not visible to the naked eye. 1 micrometer is 10 to the power of -6 meters. So you definitely need a microscope to see them, and medically important bacteria measure somewhere around 0.5 to 1.5 micrometers. So this is the picture depicting the size. If you must have seen RBCs when you were working in physiology. So they can be seen under magnification of 200x, but bacteria can be mainly properly visualized with a magnification of 1000x, and viruses are too small. They can't be seen with the bright field microscope. You need an electron microscope because viruses measure in nanometers, and 1 nanometer is 10 to the power of -3 micrometers. So looking to the shape of the bacteria, they can be spherical or oval when they are called cocci. They can be rod shaped when they are called bacilli. You can see in the picture here. They can be comma shaped or curved. One of the example is Vibrio. They can be intermediate in morphology between cocci and bacilli when they are known as cocobacilli. One of the examples is Acinetobacter. They can be spiral shaped for example, spirochetes like Treponema borrelia. Some of the bacteria have filamentous appearance, branching and filamentous appearance, for example, Actinomycetes. Moving on to the arrangement of the bacteria. The cocci can be arranged in pairs when they are known as diplococci, example for which is Pneumococcus and Neisseria. The cocci can be arranged in chains when they are known as streptococci. They can be arranged in groups, example of which is Staphylococci. The bacilli usually arranged singly, example Escherichia coli, Proteus, etc. Sometimes the bacilli may be arranged in pairs known as diplobacilli, example is Moraxella. Some of the bacilli are arranged in chains known as streptobacilli, example is Streptobacilli. Some of them have palisade arrangement, that is, they are arranged like a fence, you can see below, example of which is Dipteroids. They are nothing but Corynebacteria, and Corynebacterium diphtheriae has Chinese letter pattern. They look like, their arrangement looks like a Chinese letter. Okay. Moving on to bacterial cell structure, we'll be discussing under cell wall, cell membrane or plasma membrane, also known as cytoplasmic membrane, cytoplasmic matrix and nucleoid, and we'll also be discussing some cell appendages like capsule, flagella, fimbriae. You can see here the bacterial cell wall. So this is how the bacterial cells appear under the microscope when not stained, when no stain is used to color them. So you can see the cocci on your left side and some of the bacilli on the right side. Let us move on to bacterial cell wall. The functions of the cell wall is it confirms rigidity and shape to the cell. It takes part in cell division, that is in binary fission. It protects the cell from osmotic lysis and from toxic substances, and it also acts as a virulence factor. Now, what is a virulence factor? Virulence factors are factors which are antigenic components present in the bacterial cell which protect the bacteria from host defense mechanism and also help them in survival in the host cells. When I say host, it's the human cells. Okay, so bacterial cell wall has virulence factors like endotoxin and lipoteichoic acid which contribute to pathogenicity. Pathogenicity is nothing but ability to cause disease. Further, moving on to know the cell wall composition. Before knowing the cell wall composition, you have to know one of the staining methods known as Gram stain. You've seen a view of bacteria when they're unstained. It is very difficult to visualize them, but when you stain them, apply a dye on them, they are colored and they're easily visible. Their morphology can be well appreciated. So one of the stains is a Gram stain where you use two stains. One is crystal violet and other is safranin. Some bacteria take up crystal violet and stain purple, and other group of bacteria they take up safranin and stain pink. This is because of variation in their cell wall composition. So Gram stain separates most bacteria into two groups on the basis of their cell wall composition. So remember, Gram positive bacteria stain purple and Gram negative bacteria stain pink. You can see in the picture, the purple ones are the Gram positive bacteria and the pink ones here are the Gram negative bacteria. So moving on to the composition of the cell wall. The Gram positive cell wall has peptidoglycan, which is a major component, and the teichoic acid, whereas Gram negative cell wall has peptidoglycan, an outer membrane with bronze lipoprotein and lipopolysaccharide. So what is a common component and the most important component in both Gram negative and Gram positive cell walls? It's the peptidoglycan. So let us know more about peptidoglycan. Peptidoglycan is thicker, 15 to 80 nanometers in Gram positive bacteria, whereas it is thinner in the Gram negative bacteria, and it is composed of three components. It is made up of a disaccharide backbone, which is N-acetyl glucosamine known as NAG and N-acetyl muramic acid, which are linked by beta glycosidic bond. So there is alternating backbone of N-acetyl glucosamine and N-acetyl muramic acid, which are linked by beta glycosidic bond. Then there is a tetrapeptide side chain which is linked to N-acetyl muramic acid. And in gram-positive bacteria, there is an additional pentaglycine bridge which binds tetrapeptide side chains which are linked to N-acetyl muramic acid. This pentaglycine bridge is absent in gram-negative bacteria. So let us know more about the tetrapeptide side chain. It is made up of 4 amino acids which are L-alanine, which is present in first position in both gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. D-glutamic acid present in second position of both gram-positive and gram-negative, whereas there is variation in the third position. The third position is L-lysine in gram-positive bacteria, whereas it is D-amino P-malic acid in gram-negative bacteria. And the fourth amino acid in the fourth position is D-alanine in both gram-positive and gram-negative bacteria. You can use a mnemonic known as AGLA. That's why I have highlighted in red to remember the amino acids. But please remember, in gram-negative bacteria, instead of lysine, there is D-amino P-malic acid in the third position. So here you can appreciate the backbone, the disaccharide backbone made up of N-acetyl glucosamine and N-acetyl muramic acid linked by beta-glycosidic bond. And you can see a tetrapeptide side chain which is hanging from N-acetyl muramic acid, which is made up of alanine, D-glutamine, L-lysine and D-alanine in gram-positive bacteria. And you can see these purple colored pentaglycine bridges which are linking the tetrapeptide side chains. Moving on to gram-negative bacteria, the peptidoglycan. The third position is varying. You can see on your left side, the third position is having D-amino P-malic acid and there are no pentaglycine bridges. So looking into gram-positive cell wall, it is having peptidoglycan which is thick, which is having a backbone of N-acetyl muramic acid and N-acetyl glucosamine, a tetrapeptide side chain which is attached to N-acetyl muramic acid, and pentaglycine bridges attaching the bonding the tetrapeptide side chains. The other component of gram-positive cell wall is teichoic acid, which is a major surface antigen, which is composed of polyribitol phosphate or polyglycerol phosphate. The teichoic acid is of two types. One is wall teichoic acid. You can see the purple colored teichoic acid extending from the peptidoglycan, and a lipoteichoic acid which is depicted in this figure as a yellow one, which is extending from the cytoplasmic membrane. So one of the example of teichoic acid is N-protein in Streptococcus pyogenes. And teichoic acid is an important virulent factor which aids in adhesion of bacteria to the host tissue, and it is also anti-phagocytic. Looking into the gram-negative cell wall, the peptidoglycan layer is thin. It has a disaccharide backbone and a tetrapeptide side chain, but no pentaglycine bridge. It has a bronze lipoprotein, which is a small lipoprotein which is covalently linked to peptidoglycan, but it is embedded in the outer membrane. So the outer membrane is a phospholipid bilayer which lies outside the peptidoglycan layer, which acts as a protective barrier to cell, and it has certain outer membrane proteins and porin channels within it. Looking at the lipopolysaccharide, it is made up of three components: lipid A, or the endotoxin. We have discussed that this endotoxin is a virulence factor of the bacteria. Next component is a core oligosaccharide and O side chain, or the O antigen. So this is the gram-negative cell wall. There is a peptidoglycan, and then above the peptidoglycan is the outer membrane. You can see these blue balls which are bronze lipoproteins which are covalently linked to the peptidoglycan, and they are embedded in the outer membrane. And concentrating on the outer membrane, if you can see, there is a phospholipid bilayer. You can see the yellow ball with a green tail, which is depicted here as a phospholipid layer. and there are two phospholipid layers. One is the inner phospholipid layer and the other is the outer phospholipid layer. Inner phospholipid layer is similar to the cytoplasmic membrane. It has a water soluble glycerol phosphate portion and a water insoluble fatty acid portion, which you can see in the picture. Then how is the outer phospholipid layer of the outer membrane different? It has an additional component, that is lipopolysaccharide. Okay, and if you see at the that we have seen that lipopolysaccharide has three components. One is lipid A or endotoxin, a very important virulence factor, and this lipid A or endotoxin is composed of phosphorylated glucosamine disaccharide, which is attached to long chain fatty acids, above which is a core oligosaccharide, which is made up of ketodeoxyoctanoic acid and hepatose. And then there is a O antigen. This O antigen is made up of peculiar sugars, which is specific to each bacterial strain. And this O antigen is the one which is exposed to the host defenses, so it undergoes variation to protect itself from the host defense mechanism. There's one more thing we have to know, a periplasmic space. The periplasmic space in gram-negative cell wall is the one between the cell membrane and the outer membrane. Okay, it has several enzymes in it and certain virulence factors. Whereas the periplasmic space in the gram-positive cell wall is the one between the cell membrane and the peptidoglycan. Moving on, how can we demonstrate the cell wall? By differential staining method, that is gram stain, by electron microscopy, by plasmolysis. Say the bacterial cell is placed in a hypertonic solution. Whatever water is present in the bacterial cell, it moves out into the external environment. So the cytoplasm shrinks, but the cell wall remains intact, which can be observed by microdissection, that is microscopic dissection of the cell using the needles, and by serological method, by exposure to specific antibody. Okay, like you can to the bacterial cell, when you add an antibody against its cell wall, you can observe it as an agglutination reaction. So whatever differences we have discussed about gram-positive and gram-negative cell wall are seen in this table. Moving on to cytoplasmic membrane, cell membrane, also known as plasma membrane. It's a semi-permeable membrane which allows influx or inflow and outflow of nutrients and macromolecules to and from the cytoplasm. It is made up of phospholipids and proteins. It contains several enzymes which are associated with DNA biosynthesis, with cell wall polymers and membrane lipids, and it helps in electron transport and oxidative phosphorylation. Looking into cytoplasmic matrix, it lacks all membrane-bound organelles. It is mainly composed of water and packed with ribosomes and mesosomes. Ribosomes are sites for protein synthesis, and mesosomes are sites for bacterial respiration. You can also see some inclusion bodies, which are nothing but storage granules, like volutin granules seen in Corynebacterium diphtheria. Coming to the nuclear body in bacteria is known as nucleoid. It's not a true nucleus because it's very diffuse. It has no nuclear membrane. There's a circular chromosomal DNA and no nucleolus. It can be demonstrated by electron microscopy, and sometimes you can see some extra chromosomal DNA in the bacteria known as plasmids, which help in gene transfer. So let us move on to cell wall appendages, under which we will be discussing capsule, flagella, fimbriae and spore. So looking into capsule is a very thick, viscid, that is sticky layer which is well organized and firmly attached to cell wall of some bacteria. So capsule is present in only certain bacteria, not all of them. If this capsule is not organized and loosely attached to the cell wall, it is known as slime. So basically its composition is it's polysaccharide in nature, but in certain bacteria like Bacillus anthracis, the capsule is a polymer of D-glutamic acid, and in Streptococcus pyogenes it is made up of hyaluronic acid. Examples of capsulated bacteria are Pneumococcus, Meningococcus, Haemophilus and Klebsiella. You can see here in the picture how capsule is well organized and slime is unorganized and loosely attached to the cell wall of the bacteria. Looking to the functions of the capsule, it is also a virulence factor which is preventing phagocytosis by neutrophils. It also prevents complement mediated cell lines. Complements are certain defensive proteins present in the human serum which lyse the bacteria. So capsule prevents complement mediated bacterial cell lysis. It protects the bacteria from action of lysozymes and bacteriophages. What are bacteriophages? They are viruses which infect bacteria. And capsule of certain bacteria like Bacteroides fragilis and anaerobic bacteria is toxic to host cell. And capsule is also used to prepare vaccines against certain bacteria like pneumococcus, meningococcus and Haemophilus influenza. How do we demonstrate such capsule? By negative staining method. What we do in negative staining is we take the sample, say a CSF sample of a patient who's suspected to be suffering from pneumococcal infection. To this CSF sample, we add a drop of negative stain, either India ink stain or Negrosin stain. And you see that the background will be stained and the bacteria and capsule are unstained. Why so? Because the capsule is negatively charged and we are using a negatively charged stain like India ink or Negrosin, that is anionic dye or anionic stain. So they repel and the background is stained, and you can see here the capsule stands out as a clear halo around pneumococcus and the background is dark. Next is Mecfedin reaction, which is specific to demonstrate the capsule of Bacillus anthracis. What is so special in it? You can demonstrate the Bacillus anthracis in the blood smears. Here we use polychrome methylene blue. Methylene blue, it's understood it's blue, but what is polychrome? You are ripening this methylene blue, you're subjecting it to oxidation so that it develops polychrome properties, because of which it stains the capsule purplish and the bacilli is blue in color. You can appreciate here the purplish amorphous capsule of Bacillus anthracis. Next is a quilling reaction. It's a bedside procedure wherein you can collect the CSF of the patient suspected of suffering from pneumococcal infection. You add an anti-capsular serum, that is an antibody against the capsule, and also put a drop of methylene blue and observe under microscope. You can see that the capsule stands out prominent around the pneumococci. Moving on to biofilm. What is this biofilm? It is aggregate of certain adherent bacterial cells which are embedded within a self-produced matrix of extracellular polymeric substance. That is, they are bacterial cells which are in groups adhered and they have secreted one extracellular polymeric substance produced by them, and this extracellular polymeric substance is a slimy material produced by some strains of bacteria. This attaches to the damaged tissue and some plastic surfaces like the IV catheters, the prosthetic implants or prosthetic heart valves, and they are impossible to treat because they are resistant to antibiotics. What are antibiotics? There are drugs used to inhibit or kill the bacteria. Some examples are Staphylococcus epidermidis and Viridans streptococci, which strongly adhere to the endothelium of the heart valve and cause endocarditis. Even the dental plaques which we see are due to biofilm formation. You can see in this picture the biofilm formation in the IV line used to introduce fluids and drugs. Because of improper oral hygiene, the biofilm formed on the tooth like dental plaques, and those who on artificial implants. Here you can see the one on the hip implant. Let us move on to another appendage known as flagella. Flagella are thin or thread-like appendages which are protruding from the cell wall. They are made up of protein known as flagellin. They are organs of locomotion which confer motility to the bacteria. And examples of motile bacteria are E. coli, Proteus, Vibrio, spirochetes like Treponema, Borrelia, Leptospira, etc. Looking to the structure of flagella, it has three major components: the filament, hook, and the basal body. The filament is a portion, the longest portion lying outside the bacterial cell, which is hollow, rigid, and cylindrical. Hook is a short, curved portion attaching the filament and the basal body. Looking to the basal body has certain rings and rods which is embedded within the bacterial cell. The gram-positive bacteria has a pair of rings, one within the cell wall and other within the cytoplasmic membrane attached by the rods. Whereas in gram-negative bacteria, there are two pairs of rings, one pair in the cell wall and one pair in the cytoplasmic membrane. And the basal body is one which is helping the flagella to rotate in clockwise and anti-clockwise direction. Looking at the arrangement of flagella, it can be monotrichous, where you can see in the picture there's a single polar flagellum at one end, seen in Vibrio and Pseudomonas. Lophotrichous arrangement, whereas there are tuft of flagella, if you see in the picture, at one end, seen in Spirillum. Peritrichous, where the flagella are all over the body, seen in Escherichia coli, Proteus, Salmonella. Amphitrichous, where there is single polar flagellum at each end, seen in Bacteria Alcaligens faecalis. Looking into types of motility, there is Listeria shows tumbling motility. We all know what is tumbling. It is motile only at 25 degrees centigrade but not at 37 degrees centigrade. Only at 25 degrees centigrade this bacteria is showing tumbling motility because the flagella are produced at that temperature. Mycoplasma shows gliding motility. Clostridium, some species of Clostridium show stately motility, that is very steady and slow motion. Vibrio shows darting motility, very fast motility like shooting stars. You can see the motility like shooting stars, known as darting motility. And Proteus shows swarming motility. Let us see what is the swarming motility. Here you can see a blood agar plate where the Proteus has been inoculated in the center, and next day you see the swarming movement of this Proteus bacteria on the blood agar. Can you see a wavy movement? This is a swarming movement of Proteus on the culture media. How do we demonstrate the flagella? By stains like Leifson's method, Ruiz method, by microscopy like dark ground microscopy, phase contrast microscopy, or electron microscopy. By a method known as hanging drop method, where you see a liquid suspension of bacteria under the bright field microscope. Then by use of semi-solid media, one of the examples is mannitol motility media. And Craigy's tube method, where you use a U-tube with a semi-solid media to demonstrate the motility of bacteria like Salmonella. And by immunological or serological methods, where you detect the flagellar H antigen by use of anti-flagellar antibody. So these are some stains used, the dark ground microscopy. You can see dark ground, so the field is dark and you can see some spirochetes moving. Semi-solid media, which are the media and the test tubes, which is semi-solid in nature. You stab the bacteria into it. On the left side you can see when it is non-motile, you can see the growth only along the stab line, where on the right side tube it is diffused throughout the media, showing that it's motile. In hanging drop preparation, you're observing a drop of liquid suspension of bacteria under the bright field microscope to demonstrate its motility. Moving on to axial filaments. Instead of flagella, there are certain axial filaments in the spirochetes, which are organs of locomotion, which are located between the cell wall and the outer sheath. They are attached at one end of the bacteria and they coil around the bacteria, and they exhibit corkscrew motility, lashing and flexion extension type of motility. Moving on to fimbriae, it's a fine hair-like appendage which is thinner than flagella. It is made up of protein known as spilin, and its function is it's an organ of adhesion. It's a virulence factor which aids in adhesion to the host cell. Such pili which aid in adhesion are known as common pili. There are some special type of fimbriae pili known as sex pili, wherein certain bacteria with these special pili can attach to the other bacteria which lack the pili, and which helps in bacterial gene transfer by process known as conjugation. So here is a picture showing a bacilli or a bacteria with the sex pilus on the left side. which is made contact with the one without the pilus, and there is a bacterial gene transfer between them. Examples of bacteria having fimbria are Escherichia coli, Neisseria gonorrhoeae, Pseudomonas, and etc. The P. fimbria of E. coli attach to the urinary tract and cause urinary tract infections. The Neisseria gonorrhoeae fimbria attach to the urethra, and this is a sexually transmitted disease causing urethritis. You can demonstrate the fimbria with the help of electron microscope. Let us know about the bacterial spore. The bacterial spore is a highly resistant resting or dormant stage of the vegetative bacteria. When does a vegetative bacteria become a spore? When there is unfavorable environmental conditions, lack of nutrients, high extremes of temperature, pH, etc. The bacterial spores are formed by gram-positive bacteria like Bacillus and Clostridium. Looking into the spore structure, the main components from inside to out are the core, you can appreciate here as a green one, then the cortex, the light blue, the coat, the spore coat, and the exosporium. So the core is surrounded by an inner membrane and the cell wall, germ cell wall, surrounded by the cortex. The cortex has an outer membrane and then is a spore coat, and the external one is the exosporium. So sporulation is formation of spores from vegetative bacteria. And when does it happen? When there are lack of nutrients. Then when does germination happen? That is the spore getting converted into vegetative cell when the conditions are favorable, when there is nutrient rich media. And the spores can be round in shape, oval in shape. They can be in various positions in the vegetative bacteria, terminal, subterminal, and central positions. Let us look into sporulation. How does it happen? First, there is division of the bacterial DNA. The DNA replicates. Then there is septum formation, a 4-spore formation by invagination of cytoplasmic membrane, followed by cortex formation, and then coat synthesis happens before it is released to the external environment. And whenever the conditions are favorable, the spore germinates into the vegetative state. So this is the picture depicting the arrangement of spores. Here you can also appreciate shape of the spores. Some are round and some are oval. If you look, the above two pictures show the terminal spores, and the below, the left side one is showing subterminal spores and the right one is showing the central spores. So the bacterial spores are issues of concern. Why? If you know bioterrorism, anthrax spores were used as bioweapon in 2001 in US. These spores were sent in as mails in envelopes to various people, and many mail handlers and customers had suffered from anthrax. So its endospores can be placed in food, in water, as they can be sent as powder or spray, spreading the anthrax infection. Other diseases caused by bacterial spore are tetanus caused by Clostridium tetani and clostridial myonecrosis caused by Clostridium perfringens spores. So they're very dangerous. How can we kill these spores? By certain sterilization methods where you use equipments like autoclave and hot air oven, or chemicals like formaldehyde, glutaraldehyde, and hydrogen peroxide. How can you demonstrate the bacterial spores? By a modified Zeal neem cell staining method or by fluorescent staining method. Are there any applications related to spores? We have seen that they can be killed by the instruments like autoclave and hot air oven. So we can use the spores as indicators for proper sterilization. To see whether autoclave is functioning well, we can use spores of Bacillus stereothermophilus as a sterilization control. To see whether hot air oven is functioning well or not, whether it's killing the spores or not, we can use the spores of non-toxigenic strains of Clostridium tetani. So these are applications of bacterial spores. Let us move on to atypical forms of bacteria. Atypical forms include involution forms, certain pleomorphic bacteria, and L forms. Involution forms are the swollen and aberrant forms of bacteria when they are grown for a long time in culture media. Culture media is a media we use to grow the bacteria externally in the labs. or when these bacteria are producing some autolytic enzymes by themselves and causing swollen and aberrant forms. Example is gonococci and Yersinia pestis. Pleomorphic bacteria are bacteria which exhibit great variation in the shape and size. So they're not just cocci or they're not just bacilli. You can see here in this picture, some of them are cocobacilli and some of them are bacilli and some of them are longer bacilli. Example of pleomorphic bacteria are Proteus and Haemophilus. L forms are cell wall deficient forms. These were discovered by Kleinberger while studying Streptobacillus moniliformis, and because of the lack of the cell wall, they are not treatable by antibiotics which act on the cell wall, leading to chronic infections like pyelonephritis. In cell wall deficient forms, there are two forms. One is stable L forms, which after losing their cell wall do not revert back to the original bacteria. They don't regain their cell wall. These are known as stable L forms. And unstable L forms lose their cell wall in presence of antibiotics like penicillin. But once the penicillin is removed, they get back their cell wall. In this context, we have to know protoplasts and spheroplasts. Protoplasts are gram-positive bacteria whose cell wall is entirely lost on exposure to penicillin. And spheroplasts are gram-negative bacteria which lose most of their cell wall. Some partial amount of cell wall still remains in spite of exposure to certain antibiotics like penicillin. So this was about atypical forms. Thank you, students.